And now I'm going to turn it over to Mary and Gary, and you can tell us a little bit about full ecology.
So when we say human nature and we say reclaiming human nature, it's like it's time for us to get really real with who we are. And there's a lot of comfort to be had in that, we suggest, through full ecology.
So when I would talk about, say, the value of cooperation or diversity in an ecosystem, maybe with the wolves of Yellowstone, Mary would have an example from human society that would suggest, and this shouldn't come as a surprise, that we humans are strengthened, we humans gain resilience by virtue of the same kinds of processes that are driving all life on Earth. And it would only make sense. We've all been evolving and traveling on this globe together for a very, very long time. And we respond well to the same qualities in the environment.
One of the things that's happened with us as humans is that we've kind of gotten into this really bad habit, and we're like 2,000 to 4,000 years of practice with thinking of ourselves as separate individuals, as entirely separate from one another. So one of the things that makes full ecology full is really good attention to our social ecologies, the ones between us and the ones within us. Because the fact is, we can love the natural world, what we call the natural world, which we are. We can love that all we want, but we human beings can only be stewards to that. We can only be supportive. And of course, that's what Wild Earth Guardians is on about, right? That's your raison d'etre. We can only do that to the extent that we're taking care of these internal ecologies and these social ecologies. But ask the question, what happens if I think from my connection with these people first, with this person? What, even just the fact that we're sharing air right now. So,
and I think that's something we don't have to aspire to so much as release.
That's right.
Because it is hardwired into our genetics, if you will, that as even Darwin said, our greatest quality as human beings is sympathy and the ability to relate to others. And if you look at other social mammals, they have similar kinds of strengthening and bonding qualities that allow them to not just survive, but thrive over the long haul. Wolves being a great example, but elephants or lions, bonobos, orcas, on and on it goes. And so to come from that bonding opportunity isn't so much a matter of grasping something and evolving into a mindset we've never had. It's really more putting down sort of the limited false narrative that we've been insistent on for a couple thousand years and opening our field of vision back up.
In conservation, we're sort of working against this false dichotomy of nature versus culture a lot of the times in what we do. And so sort of recognizing that full ecology was offering a different approach, that we all have this human nature and that it resides at a deeper level if only we could tap into it. So I was wondering if you could both just sort of talk about, I know you've done some workshops with conservation organizations and what advice you offer them in the context of full ecology and how that can support the work that we do.
Well, I do think that if you're all on about nature and you pursue the reality of the natural world deeply and seriously enough, you will arrive at the notion that not just the web of life that supports that out there, but also the web of life that supports humanity. In other words, if you go in through nature, I think you've got a chance to come up through the social ecologies and start to mend that artificial divide that's existed for a long time, at least since the beginning of modern science in the late 1500s, early 1600s, and all the way since then. Likewise, I think if you go in through social ecology and you take it seriously and deeply enough, you'll start to see what supports us as a species, the same kinds of webs of prosperity, if you will, that's available to every other aspect of life. And so if you go in through social ecology, you have a chance to bounce up into the natural world. So no matter where we start from, I think we have a chance to all sort of land in this river that holds these essential truths.
Right. And contention arises, needless to say, your organization knows that. That's part of our nature, is to not necessarily agree, because our frontal lobes perceive things differently. We each have a different set of experiences and understandings. But the thing that holds it all always can be a lot more, it looks like patience. You and I talked about this a little, Leah. We don't really have words for this, which is weird because we've always been interconnected. Gary and I aren't talking about anything new. We've always been interconnected. The question is, how do we relax in that? How do we trust that even when we're at our most contentious around bison, around wolves, you name it, that there is something that is holding us all together that can guide us through?
I started out as a nature writer, science writer back in the early 80s, and I spent the first half of my writing life, some 6 years, the first half of that writing about the tracks that we leave in nature. And it was a lot of eulogies for lost places. It was really holding up our bad behavior. And I think that part of being an environmentalist needs to happen, because we need to acknowledge, we need to have the opportunity to grieve our bad decisions. But ultimately, I also was at a point where I was burning out. And so I started to ask the question, what are the tracks that nature leaves in us? So I flipped that question around, and that brings to mind a kind of nourishment that comes from what I think Mary and I are talking about, and that's to cultivate a perception by which we see the world as this fantastic web of connection. She asked earlier, does your body really end at the edge of your skin? To go through the world and really build that sense of connection will be the source of energy, if you will, that keeps us as environmentalists waking up and feeling like we're about the work of kinship. We're about the work of taking care of relatives, human and otherwise.
There's just this linguistic element that gets me every time, that I get so frustrated by. And I think it exists actually on multiple sort of sensory levels. I was just listening to a great podcast with Bernie Krause. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was sort of early in the development of the discipline of acoustic ecology. And he was just talking about the moment when we separated ourselves from the natural world acoustically, and that he grounds that in the building of like early medieval giant stone churches and places of worship, where we created structures that blocked out all sound but those that we ourselves made. And I think there's probably a similar moment to that in language as well, when we developed these terms that exist in opposition, and it makes it difficult to talk about these things that are so connected. And it's an essence, and it's a feeling, and it's an experience, and there's not necessarily words for it, which can sometimes be okay. And the other piece that I'll just mention really quickly is this idea that sometimes we can go without language. Keith Basso, who's one of my favorite cultural anthropologists, worked a lot with the Apache, talked about, there's a great ethnographic essay, Giving Up on Words, just about how they sort of have this opposite approach, where when you first meet someone, you spend a lot of time in silence, and you sort of you get a feeling for that person before you even begin to initiate a connection through language. So I think it's interesting to think about and be curious about other ways that we can connect and sort of have this shared experience with one another beyond the linguistic piece of it.
Well, and one of the things that we are seeing in full ecology is that consistently, the forest bathing thing that's kind of come online, yeah, and just consistently being outdoors, even just opening the window and hearing the birds, anything that does that is a way of experiencing that connection that's every bit as present with any human being you encounter. But we don't as easily let ourselves experience that with other people. And that's, I think, just another thing for us to watch. I think that I was saying to Gary that I just keep going back to this fact of our human nature, the fact of our being nature, the fact of that that nothing happens in any one of our human lives. Here's the kind of tough thing to take. We call it loving disinterest. We really need the natural world. I do, to live. I don't get to breathe without it. I don't get to drink water. I don't get to eat food. I got nothing without the natural world, but it doesn't need me. That's hard to take. You know, I'm an option. I'm a plus one. You know, I'm not the one that's absolutely necessary here. But while I get to be here, and then in these days of being sheltered in place, you might run across the most magnificent example of street dance, or the most incredible singing that you've ever heard. Human beings are amazing in what we can do in artistic ways. But the fact is, we must be stewards. We must be true to our nature. And so that's part of our challenge in full ecology, is to say, keep paying attention. Because if you think you got it, you don't.
And I love what Mary's saying too, because it serves improvisation. And that's one of the fundamental qualities of life on Earth, is it improvises. We tend to think it maybe acts out of just some sort of dumb routine, but that's really not true. Biology is not just connection, but it's improvisation to judge what's going on in the habitat environment around us, and then adjusting what we normally do to do it in a way that allows us to integrate even more deeply into the surroundings. And that improvisation is so important right now, given the challenges we face.
Again, fullecology.com, and another thank you to Country Bookshelf. Please support them, for those watching from Bozeman. And maybe we'll do another one. You never know.
Super. Thank you so much to Wild Earth Guardians for all the work that you do, yes, and to all of your supporters who make that possible. Really, this is good human connection.
You're keeping the candle lit through some of the darkest times I've ever lived through. Mm-hmm. And that light will carry us forward. Again, like Mary said, with the great paintings of you know, the Middle Ages. Yeah. It's not going to all get fixed in our lifetimes, but there is no substitute for taking the light in every given moment throughout our own lives, so that those who come afterward can stand on our shoulders like we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us.
Absolutely.